And now, in my opinion, and I used to have a lot of them, to be funny about a serious topic, you've got to really know your topic. You've got to really know it. And our next speaker, I believe, is both. He's the former senior economist with the National Association of Home Builders in Washington. His research and opinions have been featured in many publications, and he is the regularly featured guest on talk radio and TV, and he authors a daily 70-word commentary on the economy. And maybe if we coax him, he'll tell us how to sign up for that. His presentation title is The Economy in 2022, Growing but Slowing. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Elliot Eisenberg, Dr. Elliot Eisenberg.
It's nice to be here. I am honored that you're all here. I already feel guilty because you bring me to a lovely city. I live in Miami, mind you, but it's beautiful on the West Coast. I tell everybody move to the West Coast. Nice hotel, great ambiance, great food. And now the news I'm going to give you is, so let's get on with it, right? Let's begin. So actually, I changed the title of my talk to Take a Hike because the Fed's raising rates. They've already raised rates 4 times, and they're going to raise rates in 2 weeks. And then they're going to raise rates 6 weeks later, and then 6 weeks later again, as Lawrence mentioned. So let's begin and talk. But I want to begin by staking out a difference between me and Lawrence. I don't think we're in a recession, yet. We'll get there. Don't worry about it. But we're not quite there. We're there. We had these 2 crummy quarters just because of weird one-off reasons. Inventories bounced around. Imports and exports bounced around. So you had government spending has plummeted because COVID's largely done. So while the stimulus check stopped, if you add this up, you get really just weird one-off post-COVID returns to normalcy. And that's why you've had a couple bad quarters. But this is fundamentally a decent, I wouldn't say even decent, a fairly whatever economy. But we're creating tons of jobs. How can you have a job-full recession? It just doesn't make any sense. We're creating lots of jobs. There's labor productivity issues out there. Yeah, I get it. But no, we're not there yet. We'll get there. And I'll explain how we're going to get there and why, but we're not there yet. Let's begin by looking at GDP. GDP is all goods and services made in the US, right? Everything. And the first term is C, 69% of GDP. We'll spend a few minutes talking about that, like other stuff. The point here is GDP growth, because of C, 69% of GDP, is starting to ebb a little bit. It's ebbing a little bit because the lower half of the population is beginning to run out of money. They saved a bunch during COVID, like we all did, but they're running out of it a little bit. They're now running down their savings. They're using credit cards and so on and so forth. So it's starting to slip a little. Nothing awful, but just signs of a little bit of cracking. We'll discuss more in detail why. The second term is I, corporate investments in plant and equipment and inventories. Inventories have largely recovered, not entirely, and autos still aren't there. I get it, but generally they've recovered. Right. So, and firms that are saying to themselves, oh, a recession is likely to come. Interest rates are going up. Now is not the time I want to invest in a new piece of equipment or build a new building from scratch right now. So that's going to put a bit of a damper. Nothing profound, but a bit of a damper. The third term is G, government spending. It has dropped like a friggin' rock. We have almost never, I have never seen this. I have to go back, look data further, maybe post-World War II demobilization or something. Maybe we had something as dramatic in fiscal contraction we have had now, but this is big. And the key thing is if you add the fiscal contractionary policy that we're experiencing, I'll show you graphs on everything. Don't worry, trust me, there's lots of graphs. To tightening monetary policy, okay, that's already too much for the economy to withstand. On top of that, today, the Bank of England announced a 75 basis point hike, so 3/4 of a point hike in their interest rates. Canada yesterday raised their rates by 3/4 of a point. So you have now a global, tell them I'm busy, thank you. Maybe have RPAC get $1,000 contribution from this derelict phone. Just a thought, so everyone's raising rates. The Chinese and Japanese aside, everybody else is raising rates. So you've got global tightening, local, domestic, national tightening, contractionary fiscal policy as well, slowing income growth, it's declining, and we got a host of issues out there. The last term's exports minus imports, it's improved a lot lately because tourists are coming here and we're buying less PPP from China and they're buying more stuff from us and so on. But that's not a big story. Let's get into the details. So first is automobiles. Economists like to look at automobiles because automobiles they're not quite a house, but they give you an inkling of what a house is like. Because you don't buy a car every year. You always finance a car, right? So let's look at cars. The problem is cars now tell us absolutely friggin' nothing. If you look at the graph, you can't, there's a very light graph here, a gray bar, that's recession. So you come down, you get a recession. Down, there's a recession. Here there was also, that was the 2000.com. It didn't hurt housing, it didn't hurt autos either. Here's the housing bust that crushed the recession. This was a stupid cash for clunkers policy, whatever. I'm not bitter. My car didn't qualify, I'm not angry. Then this is COVID. Now in COVID, we didn't buy cars because we were all gonna die. There was no purpose, right? But then we get to here. So we should be there. That's where our car sales should be, somewhere around 17 million. But we don't make enough cars. We can't get computer chips and so on, inventory problems, supply chain crap. So there aren't enough cars. So who cares what the interest rate is on the car loan? Your car breaks, you got to get to work, you're buying a car. You may buy a used car, you may buy a smaller car, but you're freaking buying a car. So this is not telling us anything. So they say car sales are up, last month car sales are down, big deal. Ignore it entirely. This is now real retail sales. People look at that and say, well, that's a really important piece of nut. It's a big data. I mean, you're buying you're buying a sofa, you're buying a refrigerator, you're buying a car potentially, washing machine, air conditioner, a Land Cruiser or something. Now, also utterly and completely meaningless. Every month they'll say, oh yeah, retail sales are down. Who cares? Now, why? The cars, we explained. The cars are because there's no chips, don't have enough cars, big shortage of cars, big demand exceeds supply, price of cars keeps going up. Okay, fine. This is different. Look at the trend. So here we are buying. And then it goes to hell. And it goes to hell really fast, right? Now, if you look at the prior recession, the housing bust, you may remember that, given what you do for a living. It went down from here to here. So it went down 20, right? Here it went down 40. So it went down twice as much. And it did it in about 20 minutes, right? So that's a problem. You have a violent decline, that's a problem. Now, exacerbating the problem, then 20 minutes later, it recovers. And then a day later, it skyrockets. So look at the trend. Buying. We would be there normally. Look where we are now. We're way up. Why? It's because I bought a Peloton for myself. I bought a Peloton for my daughter. I bought a Peloton for my ex-wife. I bought a Peloton for my girlfriend, for my mistress, my mother, whatever. It's on and on. Look, we're all Peloton. I don't need any more Pelotons. Thank you very much. So now when they say, sales are flat, well, of course they're friggin' flat. I mean, what else do I need? I bought a couple of cars. I bought 4 computers. I bought 8 big screen television sets. I bought a pergola. I bought a Wolf Sub-Zero refrigerator for outside. I don't need anything, for God's sake. This has to stop. This has to either flatten or begin to drop a little bit, but we're still way above trends. Meaningless. This matters. This is important. This is total spending. This is at 69.5% of GDP. This is us buying stuff, not just stuff, but services. So I don't know about you, but what I want to do pretty much more than anything else in the whole world is go to an AC/DC concert and surf the mosh pit, cruise on with my 80,000 closest friends and scream my lungs out, right? That's what I want to do. Smoke some marijuana, have a good time. I didn't say that. Marijuana is illegal in Florida. Under no conditions I'm not condoning the behavior. I've never even done it. I've only read about it. Now we're going to come back to this in a few minutes. We'll come back to marijuana. But the point is, this is total spending. It really matters, right? And what you see here is, here's the trend like we had before. And the trend, okay, we have the big ditch. Yeah, of course. But ignore the ditch. I know that's silly, but just, here we're fine. And notice how here it's beginning to weaken a little bit. Now, I'm not ripping the ripcord. I'm not jumping out of a plane or cutting my wrists with box cutters here, okay? But I'm saying, this is making me a little uncomfortable. This is 69.5% of GDP. If it starts to wobble, this is telling me something not so great. And I'll explain to you why I think it's happening, which is more important. The manufacturing stuff we don't care about because we bought it all, the cars don't matter. This really matters because this is being pushed up already by services because we were underserviced, right? We didn't go to bars, we didn't go to ballet, we didn't go to a baseball game or basketball. We stayed home, we did friggin' nothing except buy junk from Amazon. And now we're done with the Amazon junk, but we want to go out. So even with the pent-up demand for services, this is still not doing all that great. That's a bit of a problem. Under normal conditions, when you come out of a normal recession, what happens? You want to buy things. Because during the recession, you hold back on buying expensive ticket items. You buy cheap stuff. You buy services, maybe some clothes, but you don't buy cars. You don't buy boats. You don't buy houses. You don't buy Land Cruisers. This recession, completely the opposite. We've purchased our brains out of stuff. Now we want services. But how much pent-up demand for services can there be? I only can go out to eat 21 times a week, you know? I cut my hair. I keep it short. I don't have much hair. Once a month, that's it, you know? So this starts to crumble a little. I pay close attention. So I'm nervous a little bit. Now, why has it held up as well as it has, you could ask? And it's because of household balance sheets are very strong. Yeah, because what happened over the last couple of years? Up until January of this year, the stock market, the bond market, doing great. My Bitcoin, I had millions of dollars in Bitcoin, phenomenal. I had lots of GameStop, right? Bed Bath & Beyond, mem stocks. I was doing great there. Didn't have to work because I was getting paid not to work. Didn't have to pay my mortgage. Didn't have to pay my rent. Look, there are no bills, life is phenomenal. Right? No rent, no mortgage, no student payments. I mean, this is good. And house prices kept going up. Now, this is Q1 through Q1. You can see it dips a little bit because the stock market in Q1 went down, but house prices kept going up in Q1. They kind of balanced each other out. Q2 data will come out. The market did worse in Q2. Home prices appreciated a little bit less in Q2. So it goes down a little more, but by and large, household balance sheets are good. We didn't go anywhere for so long. We built up a lot of savings. You were going to make some fancy trip to, I don't know, South America or South Africa or Australia or wherever it is, but you didn't go. And now you have all this money instead, right? So that's let's prop things up. It helped everybody. Except now, as I mentioned earlier, the lower quartile, the bottom 25%, they're beginning to run out of money. The next 25%, they're next to go, and they'll soon begin to run out of money as well. So a chunk of the population is now no better off than they were pre-COVID, and inflation's very bad. And it's sucking away income. I'm not sure who it was it Brad or Lawrence? One of you guys mentioned income's declining. I'll show you some data on that too. You can see here, look, household savings. This is crazy. If you look before COVID, it was somewhere around 7% of disposable income was saved, right? That's after tax. This is after tax income. And then COVID hits and you see these big blip ups. So the first big blip up is the first stimmy check. The second stimmy check's kind of hidden there. That's the third stimmy check right there. So first, second stimmy, third stimmy, right? So savings goes up those months because you're getting, 600, 1,400, 1,500, whatever they were. But even without the stimmies, there was lots of savings going on. Look how high, even at its bottom, it was almost 13%, roughly double what it was pre-COVID. People were saving money. We were getting the stimmy checks. We kept our jobs. You guys were making money hand over fist, right? You're making what, 6% on every net profit on every single house. I mean, it's easy being a realtor, Okay, I'm kidding. Yeah, I know. I'm joking. But you get my point. You were doing well. You had this money. You weren't going anywhere. But now it's being driven down. This is not in and of itself a great sign. We're beginning to run down our savings because we don't have enough money because inflation's bad and our wages aren't keeping up with inflation. That's the story. Inflation not only is driving us crazy, but our wages aren't keeping up. We're getting 6% pay raises and inflation's 8%. We're worse off by 2%. This is not a recipe for a happy economy. There it is. Real per capita disposable income. You can see it's going nowhere. It's flat to down. This is not a great sign. Now, a meaningful part of this is because the fiscal stimulus is gone. If you ignore Washington, D.C. money, it's actually going up. But the fact is, you still spend the money, right? So this isn't great. And now job growth is going to slow because the Fed's raising rates to drive us into a weaker economy to reduce inflationary pressures. So job growth is weaker. Per capita wages are declining. How do you have a booming economy when wages are declining? Really? We're burning through our savings a little bit. Incomes are falling, inflation's bad, fiscal policy is tight, monetary policy is getting tighter. That's a lot of headwinds for our economy to face. Maybe we don't end up having a recession and we just miss it by the skin of our teeth type of thing. And we have very slow growth. Unemployment still goes up, but not a lot. That would be the best case scenario, right? I'm suspect. Now, Lawrence showed you this graph. It's a University of Michigan index about how happy we are, unhappy we are. I take it back 20 years. I think Lawrence took it back 2 or 3, whatever. But you can see it's pretty crummy. And it's crummy because inflation's bad and our incomes are declining. How many of you have opened a conversation with your friends, or maybe enemies for that matter, do you have any idea how much it cost me to buy that airplane ticket or a ticket to go see a rock band or something, some crazy amount of money? Inflation makes us all angry. We hate inflation. There's not much economic data out there telling us that inflation of 7 or 8% is so deadly. There's no evidence of it. That being said, it wrecks our minds. We hate it. It makes us angry. We want more money as a result to compensate for the inflation. And that begins to drive an inflationary spiral, which the Fed wants to stop. So this is being driven by inflation and declining incomes, maybe fear of COVID, I don't know, whatever other. There's also other angst out there. I mean, I'm not a sociologist, but last year, 107,000 Americans died of overdoses, right? Mostly fentanyl, but because that's laced, again, $1,000 for our. Raise your hand, please. Don't be shy. Embarrass your friends. Shame them. Shame them. Yes, good for you. That man there, good for you. You're the man. Yeah, I see you're pointing to her. Yeah. Letting your other fellow realtor, you're selling her down the river. Yeah, right. Now I'm selling you down the river. I even forgot where I was now. I don't know. I got so excited about our pack. But fentanyl, yeah, 107,000 people died of fentanyl. And then on top of that, we're killing each other on the roads. Driving miles have not recovered to where they were pre-COVID because we're still not all driving to work, but road deaths, they're up. So there's something in the soup here. I don't know what it is, but there's something here, right? But look, this is manufacturing. They were a lot happier a while ago, and they've consistently gotten, last month, it didn't decline much. Economists went, yes. So, this is not great. Consumer sentiment is not good. Manufacturing sentiment is not good because inputs cost more money. It's hard to get worker supply chains are improving, but it ain't great. And into this environment, you have very tight fiscal policy already, and you've got increasingly tightening monetary policy. The Fed doesn't really want to raise rates under these circumstances when fiscal policy is tight and consumer sentiment sucks. But they've got no choice because inflation's so bad, because arguably they're a little too late to the inflationary game here. They missed the boat. The boat took off last fall. They weren't there, and now things are worse. They're catching up, whatever. This is manufacturing, so it's not great. Then there's services. Okay, it's not bad. It's kind of normal. This is good. Services are good. There's pent-up demand for services. Restaurants are busy. Hotels are busy. We can't get workers, but at least the owners aren't unhappy here, right? The purchasing managers aren't unhappy. So households aren't happy. Manufacturers are getting increasingly unhappy and on the verge of being unhappy. 50 is neutral, by the way. Services are okay. Then there's small business. That would be you. Look at that number. That's friggin' sucky. I think I'll give you some instances. For instances, this is a good sign. This is a good number. This is when Mr. Trump became suddenly President-elect Trump, and you went, oh, a tax cut's on the way, and it came. You were very happy. Then this is COVID coming. Woo, very bad, 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 bad. This decline from there to there is not trivial. It took longer to happen. These are very sudden declines and a very sudden rise, but this is a substantial decline. Now, part of it's because small businesses are often households too. The same person heads a household, ends a small business, and the stock market's down. So this is picking up that, and inflation's bad. So there's correlation between these indicators. I get it, but households aren't happy, small businesses aren't happy, manufacturers on the verge of not being happy, right? Oh, I don't have it here. CEO sentiment, we'll come back. CEO sentiment is also not good. They're unhappy. When they interview CEOs say, yeah, my business is okay, but I'm preparing for the future recession when I know things are going to get worse and other businesses aren't doing well, right? So it's either narcissism that they misunderstand their own skill set, or they're wearing rose-colored glasses, or things are going to get worse. I'm not sure which, but we could argue. But small business is not happy. CEOs aren't happy. Manufacturers. This is not an environment in which you want to tighten fiscal policy. It really is not. Usually you want to increase interest rates when the economy is roaring, right? And things are great. And they can maybe withstand some. But now we're already seeing creaks and cracks and so on and so forth. And why is this? It's all because of COVID. The COVID numbers now are pretty good. This is the number of deaths per day. We used to look at caseloads a day, right? But caseloads don't tell us anything anymore because now we do a lot of at-home testing. So for example, I take a test, I find out I have COVID. The first thing I do is call my mother-in-law. Honey, can we get together? It'd be so nice to give you a hug. I love you very much. I would never do that. I'm only divorced. Doesn't really matter. But you get the point, right? So this is better. COVID's better. And you can see like us, we're here. We're living with COVID. Yeah, whatever. The problem is, to some extent, China hasn't decided to live with COVID yet. China still has this insanely stupid zero COVID tolerance policy. They just shut down a city called Chengdu. You probably never heard of it. It's the capital, I think, Sichuan province, where all the good food comes from, by the way. 21 million people. That's like closing down New York and like Los Angeles at the same time. Because, 4 people or 14 or 44 have COVID, or it's a very small number, right? People don't want to go anywhere in China because they're afraid. They go to like an amusement park and someone gets COVID, they'll close the amusement park with you inside, the same person again. That's double, man. That is trouble. You got to take some fentanyl now. Yeah, okay. So COVID's kind of going away, but it's still there and it could rear its ugly head. It doesn't seem that way. We've all either had COVID once or twice, had 2, 3, 4, 26 shots. I don't know, whatever it is. So it's better. So this is kind of going away, right? And there's other good news here. So we talked about consumer sentiment, not good, spending, not good. Like Brad, there's good news too. This is inventories. I want you to look at the bottom color, the one the very far right on the bottom, retail sales to inventory. This is, you walk into a store, you want to buy a pair of shoes, you want to get a shirt, you want to buy a dress or something, right? And they don't have it, and you get angry, and that makes consumer sentiment nosedive. But it's much better now. It's gone from 1.1, which is low. Historically, it's been between 1.4 and 1.5, and now it hit bottom at 1.1, and now it's going straight up. And if you exclude cars, it's almost back to normal. Cars are really doing a number because you just can't get these chips. Now, in a year and a half, we're going to be awash in chips because everybody's building fabs. These fabs cost $8-10 billion. They take a couple of years to build. The government here in the US is now subsidizing. The French, the Europeans are, the Australians are, the Koreans are, the Taiwanese. We'll be awash in chips. But right now, we're still a shortage. But other than that, this is pretty good news. So if you like shopping at like TJ Maxx, or like what Wednesday morning or Thursday morning at one of those shows, one of those stores, they're going to have apparel like you haven't seen, bargains galore. So this is getting better. So supply chains are improving. You can see it here. Supply chains are improving. Trouble with trucking, couldn't get truckers, couldn't get chassis. Problems not recovered back to normal, but it's getting there. Before COVID, it was in the 45 to 50 range. 50 is ordinary. So it's still elevated, but coming way down. So trucking is getting better. Here's another index put up by Oxford Economics. It shows supply chains were peaked out where they're worst sometime back in March somewhere, and slowly have gotten better. I can show you others by the Fed banks, various Fed banks, other places. Prices paid coming down, delivery times coming down, receiving inputs for manufacturing coming down. Everything's normalizing. It hasn't gotten there. It's not perfect. Some places better than others. But I think goods inflation is a problem that goes away. Our demand for stuff has come down because we bought all the Pelotons we need. The supply chains have gotten fixed, right? So it's like there's less demand and there's more supply. So this is used car prices are now starting to meaningfully decline already. Today I saw the Manheim index. It's coming down, still way elevated, but it's way down from its peak back in March or April, right? Because a little bit more cars or a few more cars are available, right? The supply chains are better. Oil prices are meaningfully down. That's helpful. How long this stays, no one knows. This is a complete unknown. I can tell you a story that says China stays weak because of their policies. Their real estate sectors in the garbage can, education sectors in the trash can, high tech's in the trash can. They got COVID lockdowns everywhere. The mental health there is really declining because people are nervous. So but then on the other hand, maybe they change their policy. They give up on zero COVID. They let everybody get infected and they get on with life. And then the demand for oil skyrockets, prices go way up, and that hurts our economy and causes more inflation. And maybe the frackers produce more. And maybe the Europeans, Norwegians produce more. Maybe they don't. No one has any clue. Right now, it's down. That's a good thing. Supply chains are better. Raw material costs are coming down. So I think goods inflation goes down. I think raw materials go down. I think food inflation also is no longer a problem. What is a problem, and what I'm most concerned about, and I'll show you slides on this later, is wages and rents. And I think Lawrence talked about rents in this conversation. We'll get into more detail on that. But this is a good piece of news. And look at friggin' corporate profits. They're friggin' amazing. What does this mean? This means we are eager to buy stuff, and firms are able to pass their cost on to us. Whatever cost they're getting, they just pass it on, because otherwise you'd see a decline in corporate profit. No, foof. I mean, here it was good. This is right before COVID, right around $2 trillion. Now it's closer to $3 trillion. A 50% friggin' rise. This is the highest percent of GDP ever. 12% of GDP is corporate profits now. This is 12, 13. This is huge. I don't think this persists. The stock market has done well because of this, because corporate earnings have been good, because firms have been able to pass their costs on. Now, with incomes flattening and people being less happy and maybe going into recession, people rethink these sorts of things. So I'm not sure it persists. But for now, wow, corporations have pricing power because we want stuff. I went to a conference. I was in some fancy hotel. I asked, what would the rate be if it weren't for the conference I spoke at? And the person literally said to me, $1,100 a day. And I went, I used some bad words. I can't say them publicly now, but I went, no, F, but it's like, whoa. How can that be? Who on earth would pay that money? Go to Europe, for God's sake. It ain't that good. The hotel is nice. It ain't that good. So we've talked about households not feeling great. We've talked about businesses not being really excited about the world. Service providers happier, goods not so happy, right? Let's talk about fiscal policy, because fiscal policy is now profoundly contractionary. Let's go back and look at this graph. On the left, the first above the line hill, is the dot-com bust of 2000. I remember the dot-com bust because I was getting divorced. At the time, President W was president, and he gave out stimmy checks. I didn't get one. My ex-wife got it. I'm not bitter. I'm just telling you, not bitter. So we got stimmy checks, and then we had the inevitable recovery hangover, where we become a little bit more fiscally responsible. We pull back the stimmy checks. There's a little bit of contractionary fiscal policy. Right there is the contractionary fiscal policy. Then some years later comes the housing bust in the middle, right? And who was president? Obama was president, and he passes the ARRA. That was the big deal. The shovel-ready projects, infrastructure, they turned out not to be shovel-ready, but that's not his fault, right? He tried, right? There's $1 trillion, of course, is through the economy. It helps the economy. It's a boost to the economy. And then that money slowly goes away, and we have a contractionary fiscal policy. This doesn't cause a recession, and this doesn't cause a recession either. Then comes COVID. That's the tall blue bars near the very far right of the graph. And they're very big. They're huge. They're over 4% of GDP. That's 3. This is closer to 4% of GDP, right? I mean, these are really big numbers. And then it's over, and what happens next is we have the inevitable hangover. But look at the magnitude of the friggin' hangover. It's negative 3%. We've gone from +4 to -3. That's friggin' 7 percentage points of GDP being that sucking sound that H. Ross Perot talked about in 1992. It's not jobs going to Mexico. It's fiscal policy being drained in the bathtub going down. So we've got massive fiscal policy, contractionary fiscal policy that we haven't seen maybe since World War II, maybe Korean demobilization. I'm not sure. I haven't looked that far back. And now we've got really quickly tightening monetary policy. I think that's too much for our economy to withstand. With wages that are at best flat to declining, this is a big ask for our economy. So I'm a little nervous. Now, getting back to, are we in a recession or not? The answer is no, we're not. This graph takes out all the bouncy parts of GDP. Net exports, goodbye, right? Inventories, goodbye. Government spending, out. And what you end up with is this very long name thing. Final sales to private domestic purchasers, right? And it's real, so it's inflation adjusted because inflation is really bad now. So you've always got to think about inflation. Look at the damn number. It's friggin' pleasantly positive. I mean, it's not super high, but it's roughly in line with where it's been. This is not a recession. This is just 2 fluky bad quarters. And we're likely to have more of these fluky bad quarters going forward because GDP 20 years ago used to grow at 3.25%. Now it's down to 2 because of population growth and labor productivity growth, which are all sucky. Whole different conversation. But as GDP weakens, and now we're at this new normal of 2%, when it's 2%, the chance of having a crummy quarter because of imports or exports or trade or inventories or government spending or whatever go up or down is not that small. The slower the GDP is, the easier it is to get into a negative quarter. So we're likely to experience like this more going forward than we have in the past. Doesn't mean we have a recession, but we'll get there. And now I say, why do I see the recession? Because of this. I've already told you about the spending not doing well, and consumers not being happy, and small business not being happy, and manufacturers not being happy. Let's now talk about the yield curve. The yield curve looks like this. This is the yield curve. The yield curve on the bottom axis is time, 1 year, 5, 10, 20, 30 years. On this axis, the y-axis, it's interest rates, 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%. Think about a home mortgage. You guys know something about home mortgages, I think. Your buyer wants to buy a house, you tell them, they get a mortgage. Well, how much a 30-year mortgage? Well, it's 6%, you tell them. They go, whoa, that's too much money. I can't afford it. You go, well, let's get you a 20-year mortgage. Payments are higher, but the rate's only 5. I'm making this up, right? Hey, I'll ask 20. Maybe Brad says, maybe he should get a 5-1 mortgage. I think we talked about a 5-1 mortgage, Brad. What's that going at now? 4? Because the less time you borrow for, the less you pay. Because the lender is taking less risk. There's interest rate risk, there's credit risk, there's default risk, there's death risk. It goes on, right? 30 years, long time, betting on you to survive for 30 years here, you know? So you borrow less, you pay less. So you come in here, 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, the longer you borrow for, the more you pay. Okay, now, sometimes the yield curve goes, and that's like crazy. When short-term money is more expensive than long-term money. That's like ridiculous. The first time I heard this, I thought my teacher in college was on pot. I was confused. Where he's taking psychedelics or psilocybin or, you know, not that I know what these things are, but just I read about it again. To make a long story short, the yield curve normally upward sloping. The longer you borrow, the more you pay. But sometimes the Fed begins like now into a rate rising cycle. So this end, the short end of the yield curve starts to go up. Okay, the long end goes up with it because at first the economy is pretty strong. We're doing okay. We got to tamp things down. Okay, fine. But then the Fed begins to raise the short-term rate a lot. And then the market goes, I'm nervous. I think we're going to get into a recession. And as that recession concern becomes reality, the long end of the yield curve starts to go down. And that's what's happening now. The Fed's going to push up the short end so much. The long end isn't going to keep up. It's going to drop a little bit. And right now, the short end's at 3.3, 3.25, 3.3. The long end's at 3, right? 25, 30 basis points, a third of a percentage point differential. Okay, so you go, okay, Elliot, that's really entertaining. Why do we care? This we care. This graph, the bar shows a flat yield curve. Whenever the yield curve is positively sloped, the blue squiggle is below the line. That's happiness. But whenever the yield curve goes, whoa, bad. It wasn't the same person again. It's somewhere else. I saw that. That's your first one. The other person had 2. You get a second one. But every time the yield curve inverts, the blue squiggle goes above the red bar. Okay. And every single time it's happened, with the exception of 1966, if you look carefully, you see a gray bar here, a gray bar, 2 gray bars, an inversion, a gray bar, an inversion, a gray bar, an inversion, a gray bar, an inversion, a gray bar. And now we have an inversion. This is a perfect predictor. It's not causing the recession. This is like a thermometer. You walk into the doctor's office, they throw in the old days, a thermometer in your face. Oh my God, you've got a temperature of 117. You must be really sick. That's amazing you're still alive, but whatever, you know, this is telling you, you got some monetary policy issues that have to be resolved here. You know, you got issues here. Wow, this is not a Florida welcome. I'm going back to Miami, man, where they like me. My neighbors like me. No one calling. No. So this is making me nervous. This is making me nervous, right? Consumer sentiment's not good. Small sentiment, services of business is not good. CEOs aren't happy. The yield curve is inverted. Fiscal policy is tight, as is monetary policy. So Why am I so sure? We have the yield curve, but now let's look at interest rate movements. This is the history of interest rate movements of the Fed funds rate, the rate they control, and the rate that in 2 weeks, they're going to jack up by 75 basis points or 3/4 of a point. So the blue line is the Fed funds, right? And these are all recession bars. They raise rates, you get a recession. You raise rates, you get a recession. You raise rates, a recession. You raise rates, a recession. You raise rates, a recession. But some of you are going to point out, hey, Elliot, whoa, there's that, this, and that. That's 64, 84, and 94. So I called up Jay Powell. I made this observation. I said, Jay, wait 2 more years to raise interest rates. In 2024, we should be fine, right? He said, thanks very much, Elliot. So let me put this into language you understand. Let me give you an example. You come to me, you're a patient. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I'm making this up. You have a little limp. Nothing bad, but a little limp. And you like me to get rid of the limp. So I talk to you. I say, yeah, I guarantee you 100% success. You're not going to limp when you walk off the table. Now, based on history here, I've done 13 of these procedures before. 10 times the client died. That's called a recession. But 3 times they survive. So when they survive, they get up and they have no limp. And when you're dead, you also have no limp. No limp. I'm not lying. Now, tell me, you have a 3 in 13 chance of living? I think you're gonna limp the rest of your life. Yeah, right, exactly. So the Fed is now doing something that they're not really good at doing. It's not that they're stupid people. It's that they don't friggin' know the future any better than you do. They have no idea what's coming on. Powell talks every couple of weeks. He spoke today at the Cato Institute. In 2 weeks, he'll go to Congress. He gives press conferences. Everyone waits on every word he says. The stock market bounces, interest rates move. No one knows jack. So someone else did some cute research. The Fed, the board of the members of the FOMC who change interest rates, who meet every 6 weeks, they give us, in 2 weeks when they meet, they're going to give us their predictions of the Fed funds rate 12 months ahead. That's part of what they do. They tell us this to give us insight into what they're thinking and kind of stuff like that. So someone took all this data and said, how accurate are they? This is the rate they control. We're asking you to predict the rate that you control. 34%. That's what they get. They're right 34% of the time. I mean, a coin would do better. And then when they asked about, give us GDP, unemployment, or inflation, it ranges between 34 and 19. The Fed knows nothing. Powell just trash talks. It's just we're data dependent. Of course we're friggin' data dependent. I married my ex-wife that was data dependent. I just looked at the wrong friggin' data. I mean, I think I'm a smart guy, but you just make mistakes because no one knows the future. He doesn't know the future either. So he makes stuff up. He says, yeah, we're this. Yeah, we're flexible. No, we're rigid. Yeah, whatever. He just makes this garbage up. Ignore what he says. The problem is markets pay attention. That's the problem, right? Now, when will the recession hit? So this data shows you, look at the bottom corner, it shows you roughly 2 years from the date of the first rate hike. The first rate hike occurred in March. So normally, think March of 2024, we get a recession. That's 2 years after the first rate hike. No, I think it comes much earlier than this because the Fed's raising rates really fast. They're raising rates 3/4 of a point 2 meetings ago, last meeting, now this meeting, then 50 basis points the next meeting, and 50 points 3 meetings ago. I mean, this is a huge amount. They raised rates by 300 basis points in like 6 months. That's crazy. So the normal time they raise rates 1/4 point every meeting or something. They take their friggin' time, they party a little bit and have a margarita. Now they're on a speedboat to a recession. So the question you might ask me is, how come it normally takes 2 years? Even a year is a pretty long time. I'm predicting a recession like in April or something. Why does it take so long? Okay, let me give you an analogy. I don't know if any of you have ever had the experience of eating some like a brownie or a gummy bear that's laced with THC. I don't know. I know I never have, but I read about it. And you read the paper, people tell you their experiences. So I'll tell you an experience that a friend of mine had. So they took a gummy bear, 10 minutes later, nothing. So second gummy bear, nothing. They think that person thinks that they're very strong, that they can withstand the onslaught of THC that's coursing through their body. They have a third gummy bear. And then about 10 minutes later, the freight train hits them. The world is spinning. They're on the sofa and they're out for 24 hours. Again, it's illegal in Florida. Do not consume marijuana. We're somewhere now in the monetary policy world about to consume our second gummy bear. We're still feeling fine. We're thinking this time is different. Yeah, interest rates don't matter. What do you mean interest rates don't friggin' matter? They friggin' matter. Buildings get stopped being built, right? IPOs stop happening. SPAC deals, they've all gone reverse now. Junk bond yields, difference between them and treasuries is widening. Financial conditions haven't tightened wildly, let me tell you, but they're beginning to tighten a little bit. And that's what the Fed wants. Housing's already in a recession to some extent, right? New construction, certainly, right? So you're starting to see the effects. Rates are going to get higher, and the lagged effect of the THC is going to hit us sometime in the spring. And then it's too late. Then they'll want to maybe lower rates, but they won't. They won't, because they want to squeeze inflation out of the system, right? So they're going to say, no, we're going to keep rates. Lawrence talked, he said maybe they'll lower rates end of the year. Yeah, that's entirely possible. But I mean, that's a long time away. That's like 15, 16 months. They're going to keep raising rates through December, January, and then keep them flat through the end of the year or November or something, whatever. That's a long time of high rates. Something's going to give. Our economy will weaken. Now, how long will the recession last? I don't think it lasts that long. If you look at this graph, this goes all the way back to pre-Civil War, all the recessions the US have had. Just right of center is one that says 41 months or 43 months. That's the Great Depression. So it's almost 4 years of recession, right, in a row. Since then, we haven't had a lot of long recessions. We had a 16-monther, a 16-monther, and an 18-monther. Let's take them in reverse order. The 18-monther was the housing bust. What made the housing bust special was that real asset prices had to come down. There was a massive housing bubble. Credit conditions, appraisers, everybody was involved, the securitizers. No one was at fault, arguably. The credit condition, my cat got a mortgage, there were some problems out there. So when real prices have to come down on physical assets, you got a problem. Similarly, the first 16-monther back in 80, 75, that was the oil embargo, the OPEC oil embargo that began in 73 or 74 after the war, the Yom Kippur War in Israel, right? So we had real asset prices had to come down because oil prices quadrupled from $3 a barrel to 12. So factories that were profitable at $3 a barrel oil suddenly become very unprofitable really fast at 12 bucks, and you had to wait in line to get gas, right? So that was a weird one-off problem. The one in the middle is Paul Volcker raising interest rates when inflation had gotten out of hand throughout most of the 60s and all of the 70s. You go, whoa, that's kind of similar today. And I go, no, it's not. That was 20 years of really bad monetary policy and 20 years of really bad, almost 20 years of bad fiscal policy. We had the war on poverty going on and the Vietnam War, and our economy was being demanded more from our economy than it could produce, generating inflation. And the central bank didn't do much about it. The central bank said, yeah, whatever. They tried to do some things, I give them credit, but the three central bankers at that time, William McChesney Martin, Bill Miller, and Arthur Burns, were all idiots. Nice guys, smart people, but they were just dumbasses, right? They were. Moreover, the presidents that they worked under, mostly LBJ and Nixon, Ford and Carter were not violent towards their central bankers, but Nixon and LBJ beat them hard. And there was one instance I remember reading about it. It said LBJ cornered the central banker, took his index finger and hit him on his shoulder blade and screamed at him, apparently, boys are dying in Vietnam and you don't care. Okay, if LBJ, the president who's towering over me, screaming at me, saying lower rates, I'll say, okay, Mr. President, I'll lower rates. Right? But now the central bank has independence. Congress has given it. They can take it away. They're Congress. But they have some independence. And Powell was late to the game. Yeah, sure. But he ain't 17 years late. He's 7 months late. And he's telling us now hard he's going to raise rates to change our expectations of the future so that we don't expect inflation to be bad a year or 2 years out. So he's making up for lost time. The price that may well be a recession as a result, because he wants to get the economy, inflation down. And that he said, that's my number one concern. We're not going to rest until we do it. It may come back. We have to be fervent and determined. We can't let up too quickly. I mean, he's given us all the smoke signals that he is going to drive us into recession if that's what it takes to get inflation under control. And that's the right call, because the longer it takes, like it did in the 60s and 70s, the longer it persists, the longer it stays, the more it gets embedded in our minds, then we begin to want pay raises. And then that causes a vicious cycle, because the cost of good goes up because we get paid more money. And then the cost of good goes up more because inflation goes up. We want more money and there's more inflation. The Fed doesn't want. Let's talk about labor markets. Labor markets are both way better than you thought and way worse than you thought at the same time. First, the data. I think Brad showed this data. This is pre-COVID. This is post-COVID. Employment today is several 100,000 more than it was pre-COVID nationally. In Florida, almost back to trend growth, Brad, from what you showed us. But nationally, we've caught up. The trend, of course, would be somewhere up there if you continued that line. We're way behind, but we've caught up. This is very good. Let me explain. On the far left, the first hill is the dot-com boom, then the dot-com bust. We lose 4 million jobs, or 3 million jobs, peak to trough. It takes us 4 years to get the jobs back. 4 years to get back 3 million jobs. In the middle of the graph is the housing bust. We lose 8 million jobs, peak to trough. It takes us 6 years to get these jobs back. Now we lost 22.5 million jobs. That's crazy. And yet in 2 years and 5 months, we got all the jobs back. Lightning fast. It's like the workers are coming back in droves. I mean, droves. They're not coming back fast. They're coming back super fast. So what the hell's the problem? The problem is demand came back much faster because we had to save money, the stimmy checks, don't pay your rent, don't pay your mortgage, Bitcoin doing well, the stock market, the bond market, everything's roaring. We had tons of money. We're at home. We had nothing to do. Let's buy our brains out. So demand, supply comes back really quick, but the workers aren't coming back fast enough. That gap is a supply chain problem. Here, Europe, everywhere. That's the problem. So the workers are coming back, but the demand came back even more quickly, causing problems. Who could have predicted this? This is the issue. Had I seen this, I would have been a genius. I didn't see it. So unemployment as a result is plummeted. It's back to where it was. Just before COVID, which is right there, that's just before COVID, right there is before COVID, it was 3.5%. That was the lowest level it had been since the late 60s, right there. So if we see there and there, it had never been that low. So here we enter COVID at 3.5%, the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years since we were sending our kids off to Vietnam and so on and so forth, right? So now it's 3.7, it's up a bit, but it's still very, very low, very, very low. It's too low. It has to go up. We need it to go up because we need wage pressures to come down. With so few workers, right now there are 2 open jobs for every unemployed American. There are 5.5 unemployed Americans. There are 11 million open jobs. We've never experienced this before. Like 6 months ago we did, but never, until now have. There's just crazy demand for workers out there. Hotels are hiring people. People want workers. They don't want to let go of their workers. They're afraid they can't get new ones. We better hire what we can get and hoard them or something, right? So there's huge demand for workers. But the problem is this problem too. The labor force participation rate's gone down. People have friggin' quit. There's something now different about the world. People just don't want to work like they did for some reason, right? People have changed what they want. They've had a near-death experience. Their mother, their father, their sister, their brother has died. Someone they know has died or gotten very sick or almost died, or they know this virus that they could kill them, and they go, I want out for God's sake. So I talked to the person here in the hotel. She was moving the cart, with the towels and the lotions and sheets and stuff. I said, how's it going? She said, hey, it's good you asked me. I'm changing jobs tomorrow. I said, no kidding. She said, yeah. Tomorrow morning, I'm starting as a co-pilot for Delta. She said to me, I can drive the truck well. So when the plane's on the ground, I can drive it. So the pilot's going to drive in the air. I'm going to drive on the ground. And they said they're so desperate for co-pilots. They said, sure. So now, people want more out of life. They want a better job, whatever it is, right? So look, and other reasons are people quit. People quit. You were a manicurist. So during COVID, the worst of COVID, every hour, 20 minutes, someone comes, gives you your hand. and they breathe all over you. And they're gonna kill you. And you have grandkids, you hate your husband, but you love your grandkids, you hate your kids, but you love your grandkids, and you want to kiss them more, so you quit. So people quit, that's one. Two, there's no freaking teachers. When there's no teachers, someone's got to stay home with the kid. The kid doesn't get educated. This turns out to cost the kid lifetime income, 6, 7, 8% of lifetime income because of essentially the year they lost during the 2 years of the craziness of COVID and the masks and the learning at home or not learning at home, whatever. So the kid's not getting educated. The employer doesn't have the employee. The household doesn't have the money, and the parent doesn't have a career, right? Now, who stays home, mommy or daddy? Turns out to be almost always mommy. Mommies love their kids way more than the daddies do. Honey, I love the kids. Bye. Wreck your career. Thanks. Taking it for the team. Thank you. This is the problem. This is the problem. And then okay, maybe there are daycares. But no, there are no friggin' daycares either. So you can't drop the kid off anywhere. So this poor person staying friggin' home, playing hide and seek for 7 hours with a 3-year-old. As fun as it is, it ain't fun, let me tell you. Then there's plain old death. Since COVID began, since the 26, 27 months since COVID began, look at the number of Americans who died. Compare that number to the number of Americans who died in the 27 months before COVID. Now, I'm going to make a vast generalization and insult both Democrats and Republicans at the same time here. The Democrats are going to say they died all of COVID because they didn't wear the mask. That's not true. The Republicans are all going to say there is no COVID. They died because of heart attacks and cancers that weren't detected because the hospitals were full of that stupid crap. It's not, I'm making exact on both sides. The point is, it doesn't matter what your opinion is. The fact is, they're dead and they're not going back to work. All right? So now, all of them aren't workers. Some of them are retired people, but a quarter of them work because they're young enough to work, right? So you lose a couple 100,000 there. You lose a couple million because of the teachers. You lose 1 million because they just won't go back as long as COVID's around. There are 3 million equivalent, full-time equivalent workers who aren't working because they have long COVID bad enough they can't work. You got 3 million Americans who are taking care of people who have COVID or long COVID. You add it up, million here, 2 million here, 3 million here. Holy cow, that's a lot of people. That's why our labor force is tighter. That's why we don't have enough workers. We need to get more workers, for God's sake. Then there's just people being sick. This is the worst of Omicron. Almost 4 million people weren't working that month, right? And there are 4 million more taking care of them. And what were they all doing? They were on their damn phone, buying crap on Amazon, making supply chain problems worse. I'm not kidding, right? So you got all these weird problems, people not working, supply chains breaking down, the sickness exacerbating supply chains, worsening inflation. Oh, man. And then you have immigration problems. Now, we have an illegal immigration problem, I understand, right? Now it's an alarm. Wow, I get no respite here. I'm just leaving now, yeah. So this is immigration. If we had the policies that we had through the Obama administration, now through Trump and almost the first half of Biden, we'd have 2.5 million more legal immigrants in the country. But President Trump made it harder for immigration to come, political stuff, I get it. And Biden said, oh, that's a bad policy, let's continue it. Now, I hate them both for very different reasons. So what was the first thing that Trump did? Got us out of TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, a really, really, really bad idea. And we're now at a competitive disadvantage to so many other countries in trade. But Biden thought, it's got to be something I can do that's equally stupid. I'm going to think of something. And let's kill the XL pipeline. We don't need energy. That's old-fashioned crap. Done. No, now we have to grovel and go to Saudi Arabia and beg Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, to make more oil. The Canadians would gladly. They got an ad in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Canadian oil is friendly oil. That was their slogan. No pipeline, no oil. So what do people do? There's no jobs and demand is strong. They make their own business. No rent to pay, no mortgage to pay, no student loans to pay. Unemployment checks, no child tax credits. It doesn't get much better than this. So you open your business and you're all Uber drivers, right? Maybe they'll work out down the road, but they're not working out right now just yet. So you end up with a graph like this. This is a crazy graph. Look at the blue on the left-hand side. The blue is the percentage of the labor force that quits their job every month. So on the far left in blue, this is the dot-com boom, 2.4% of the labor force quit their job every month at the peak of the dot-com boom. The next big boom was the housing boom, left of center. 2.2% of the population quit their job every month. Okay, you with me? Now on the far right, not far right, the near far right, right there, that's before the COVID lockdown, 2.4% of the population quit their job. So when the economy's roaring and unemployment's low and things are good, and we're channeling our inner Johnny Paycheck, take this job and shove it, 2.2, 2.4, quit their job. But now it's 2.7, it was as high as 3. If I didn't know what was going on, I would think the unemployment rate was well below 3%. Something has changed, there is no doubt. Will they come back? I don't know, we'll see. But right now, and as a result of that, look at this graph. Look at this graph. This graph says if you're a loser down here in this color gold and you keep your job, 6% pay raise. But if you have inner drive and intestinal fortitude and tell your boss to shove it, you get 8.5. So we're all quitting jobs. It's like friggin' musical chairs. We're all quitting jobs, getting more money, raising inflation, making the economy worse, making the Fed have to raise rates higher. So do we have inflation? You friggin' better believe we have inflation. Yeah, hello, there is inflation. So now the Fed's got trouble. Labor markets are the big thing. Labor markets are killing us. Wage inflation is too big and rent inflation is too big. Rent inflation 6-7%, wage inflation 6-8%. This is well above the Fed's desire of 2% inflation. They have to cool the economy down meaningfully. Even if energy inflation and goods inflation and food inflation goes away, you've got real estate rental inflation is like 30% of CPI or 40% of CPI. So here's it's CPI regular, and that's without food and energy. Economists like to look at without food and energy because food and energy, as you know, bounce around because of wars, Europe, right? And weather, right? Scorching hot or cold or low water or whatever. So you look at the red. The red's coming down. Good news, good news, good news. But wait, I'm now going to replace the red line. The blue line stays the same, but the red line is now no longer core CPI, but service CPI. Whoa, hello. Houston, we got a problem. Inflation, if you look at median inflation, what's generally going on? It continues to rise. Inflation is going down now because food inflation is going down, energy inflation is going down, but not general economy-wide inflation. If this inflation persists and rent inflation continues to rise, or even stay at 7%, we got a problem on our hands. So the Fed's going to raise rates, and this is where the rubber hits the road. So right now, the Fed rate is 2 3/8. They're going to raise it at least half a point. Probably they're telegraphing 3/4 of a point. They're going to have 2 more meetings by the end of the year. If they raise half a point now and then a quarter, we end up there. But if they end up raising 3/4 of a point and then half a point, we end up at this level at December 31st. And they're talking about raising rates beyond that. It all depends on inflation. As Lauren said, no one knows what's going to happen. If inflation comes down quickly, like next couple of months, like an anvil being pushed off a cliff, no recession. Fed stops, rates come down, hallelujah. The war in Europe ends, China ends its zero COVID tolerance policy. Yeah, miracles happen, right? This could happen. All gone. But under normal circumstance, I think inflation falls too slowly. The Fed keeps raising rates. They drive us into recession. That's what I think happens sometime next year. Now, this is evidence of rental inflation. That's friggin' nuts. That's untenable. You have to lose enough jobs so the demand for housing goes down so that this is pushed down. And that means unemployment's got to rise from 3.5 to 5.5%. It's just got to, right? Here's shelter. This is just what? This is owner equivalent rent. So what your house would rent for if you rented your house. And here's one more. Primary residence, so not including vacation homes. No matter how you measure rent, it's going way up. So quickly, we'll look at a couple slides locally and we'll wrap it up. This is what CoreLogic says is going to happen to home prices. Look, CoreLogic's smart, but they don't know anything either because no one knows the future. If they did, they wouldn't work. If Brad knew the future, he wouldn't work either. If Lawrence knew, he also wouldn't work. But they're saying it looks pretty good in Florida because immigration from north is good. Higher income people are moving here. Taxes are low. Weather's nice. House prices are cheap. It's a pretty good. Texas, for the same reason, is a very good story. They have the same thing. Low income taxes, decent weather. Houston sucks, but whatever. I'm not going to go on. Then there's future growth. Where are people moving? They're moving south and west. They're moving to Texas, the Intermountain West, like Idaho, Nevada, Utah, right? Texas, and the north in the east of the Mississippi River, it's the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee. Those are the better states last 10 years. Last year or two, same thing. Intermountain West, Texas, Montana, no one lives there, as Lawrence talked about. And then the South, those are the better states, right? And then in terms of moving, where are people moving to? This is 2019, Florida's 7th in the country. People are moving here. 2020, 9th in the country. 2021, 9th in the country. Florida had a 1.1% population growth last year. That's 10 times the US average of 1/10. Because people are moving here, there's population growth. It's a dynamic, growing state. This will buoy up home prices because you're not building enough home prices, both Brad and Lawrence talked about earlier. So, and then my last comment is the overall economy is weakening. I don't think we're in a recession. Lawrence does. It doesn't really matter. We've had crummy growth. We had negative growth for 2 quarters. Over the course of this whole year, it'll end up being about 0 because 3 and 4 will be better, but nothing remarkable, right? And next year, I'm more concerned about. This is March. Darker colors are better. That's July. It's a lot weaker because the economy is weakening because rates are going up. So if you put it together, 22 will have 0 growth at the end. 2 quarters that are bad, 2 quarters that are better. The Fed's going to keep raising rates. How much they raise depends on inflation. What happens to inflation? I wish I knew. The Fed's going to create another million jobs before the year's up. We've already done 2.5. Inflation's peaked in July. It's how fast it falls is all that matters. No one knows. Spending on services will rise. We're done buying stuff. Ignore cars, ignore retail sales. Look at overall spending. I want you to focus on inventory. As inventories rise, price appreciation will go down. If inventories rise enough to 10, 11 months, prices will start to decline. That's just the way it is. There's a beautiful graph between inventory and price appreciation, straight like that, right? There's nothing magic. Inventory, inventory, inventory. And as far as the Fed's concerned, look at inflation. It's at public enemy number 1, and unemployment is closely related public enemy number 2. We have to see inflation come down. We have to see unemployment rise before the Fed begins to start to even feel happy and give us a little bit of happy mood music. This is my name, my cell number, phone number, Twitter handle, email address. I put out 70 words on the economy. Sign up if you'd like. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.